A little while back, we saw that the study of the external environment really comprises of study of the macro environment of ideas and the industry environment, which is the immediate environment which impacts the company. Now, to study the industry environment, to study the immediate economic environment which impacts the company, probably the best way of doing it is to resort to the 5 forces model, which was elaborated by Professor Michael Porter of the Harvard Business School 30 years back. For the last 30 years, this model has remained the last word in industry strategy. Let's have a look at what Professor Porter has to say about industry strategy.
Our guest today is Michael Porter, professor at Harvard University and head of the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness. He's the author of the forthcoming HBR article, The 5 Competitive Forces That Shape Strategy, a reaffirmation, update, and extension of his groundbreaking 1979 article, How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy. Mike, thanks for joining the program. To start, let's remind our viewers of what the 5 competitive forces are.
Well, Tom, the basic idea of the competitive forces starts with the notion that competition is often looked at too narrowly by managers. And the 5 forces say that, yes, you're competing with your direct competitors, but you're also in a fight for profits with a broader, extended set of competitors, customers who have bargaining power, suppliers who can have bargaining power, new entrants who might come in and kind of grab a piece of the action, and substitute products or services that essentially place a constraint or a cap on your profitability and growth. So the 5 forces is kind of a holistic way of looking at any industry and understanding the structural underlying drivers of profitability and competition.
So I use these to think about my rival makes it difficult for me. The threat of substitutes means I can't overcharge. The threat of new entrants means I can't overcharge.
Right.
And the same thing with the
buyers and suppliers. There's underlying drivers of each of those forces that the model really sort of unveils, and then you can actually apply this. Every industry is different. Every industry will have a different set of economic fundamentals, but the 5 forces help you home in on, first of all, what's really causing profitability in your industry, what are the trends that are the most likely to be significant in changing the game in the industry, where are the constraints which if you can relax them might allow you to find a really strong competitive position.
So how would you apply this analysis to an industry, airlines, for example?
Well, airlines is a great industry. It's actually, you'll see in the article, you've seen in the article, that there's a chart that compares profitability of industries, and airlines, I think, has been on the bottom of that list for decades. It's among the least profitable industries known to man. And the 5 forces really allows you very quickly to understand why. I mean, let's just go around the chart. The nature of rivalry is incredibly intense, and it's almost exclusively on price. It's been very hard to differentiate, to get the customer to wait even an extra 2 or 3 minutes for another flight if they can get on the flight at a cheaper price. So there's been a very intense price competition, low barriers to entry, a constant stream of new airlines coming into the industry, despite the fact that the profitability is low. It's always puzzled me.
The low barriers to entry because you can rent a plane, you don't have to buy them.
You can rent a plane, you can lease a gate. It's all generic technology. You can start with one flight between 2 city pairs. You don't have to, there's no real need to have a whole network in the beginning. And yet people keep coming in. I think it's just one of those sexy industries. It's a great example of how sexiness or coolness or hotness or chicness has nothing to do with industry profitability. The underlying structure is what drives profitability. The customer is very fickle and price sensitive. Suppliers of aircraft and aircraft engines and even aircraft gates at airports now have a lot of clout. They can bargain away most of the profits. GE and Rolls-Royce and Airbus and Boeing make a lot more money than airlines. They get most of the profit. And then, of course, there's always a substitute of getting on the train or driving your car or shipping your goods by air, and that's kind of kept a concern.
And you have powerful suppliers of labor too. That's another powerful supplier.
Right, exactly. Here, there's a great case where you have unionized labor, and unlike other industries, in this industry, particularly with the pilots, the labor can literally shut you down, and there's no way around them. So it's an industry where there are spurts of what you might call mediocre profitability, punctuated by long periods of terrible profitability.
Right. That was a very interesting outline of Five Forces model by Professor Porter. Let's try and understand how we can apply that model to our purpose of studying the external environment, studying the industry environment, which is part of the external environment. We must recognize that the basic purpose of our studying the external environment is to identify some opportunities in the environment which the company can make use of, as well as some threats, actual or potential threats, which the company should guard itself against. For instance, a power company which has the opportunity to buy a coal mine would say that today acquisition of coal is a major problem in the operation of a power company, and hence buying a coal mine is a wonderful opportunity to stabilize business. On the other hand, if you look at the airline industry, right, and in the airline industry, if you find a particular company which is part of a large industrial group and therefore does not depend exclusively on the airline operations for its survival, such a company is a threat to all other companies in the airline industry, which are companies dependent entirely on the airline industry, right? So when you have a company entering an industry which does not depend purely on operations in that industry for its survival, but has other sources of survival, then that is a potential threat. That is one kind of potential threat. Now, these kinds of opportunities and threats in the industry environment need to be spotted, and that is where the Porter Five Forces model will help us. What the model does is that it identifies 5 broad forces which help to make an industry attractive. What is the meaning of making an industry attractive? An industry is attractive to a company if competing in that industry fairly and transparently will allow the company to make margin, to make profits through satisfying a customer need. Let me repeat this. An industry is attractive to a firm if that industry permits the firm to make a margin, to make a profit through satisfying a customer need. Such an industry is attractive. An industry which does not allow a firm to make a profit, even though it satisfies a consumer need, is an unattractive industry for a firm. Now, what is the role of strategy in all this? The role of strategy is to look at the environment, to look at the industry environment, which is part of the external environment, and to take advantage of opportunities and to guard against threats. That is the role of strategy. Another role of strategy, which is a very interesting role, is attempting to influence the environment in a way which will be beneficial to the company.